Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another GeoStrata Extra. I'm Brad Keeler. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and we are very happy to welcome you to our latest episode. This one will be on geoeducation, and we will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. First, I must tell you a little bit about who we are and what you are watching. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, you can go over to geo-institute.org, and there you will learn that we are a technical society of about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and/or geologists, and we are one of 9 institutes housed within the American Society of Civil Engineers. We publish an amazing magazine that perhaps you receive. If you don't receive it, you can read it online at readgeo.com. If you do receive it, you should have the April-May issue. It says something like geoeducation on the cover. Every time we put out an issue of GeoStrata, we do one of these shows. Oh, Joel is very helpful, one of our guests today. He's got that front and center there. We do one of these shows every time we put out an issue. We pick an article from the issue. One of our esteemed editors does a behind the scenes, behind the article interview with the authors, and that is where we find ourselves today. I will make 2 pleas with you before we begin. One of those pleas is that when you are at geoinstitute.org, you should click on the link that says Student Participation Fund, and you can make a contribution to support Geo-Institute student programs. This year we have the 96 Club. You make a $96 donation and you receive Carl Terzaghi in your very home, or a likeness of him whose head bobbles. Strongly recommend that you do that. The other thing that I would recommend that you do, if you like what you're going to see today, and I think you will, click subscribe, click get notifications, and you'll be notified every time we post something to our YouTube channel. We are very fortunate, very happy today to have a sponsor for this episode of GeoStrata Extra, and it is Tensar. And we have a brief message from them.
Check out Tensar Plus, the award-winning design software for construction professionals to design with geosynthetics and calculate their value on projects. Tensar Plus is simple to use with a powerful engineering system at its core. It leverages our decades of research and experience with soils all over the world, so you can count on your solutions working the first time, even in the most difficult conditions. Whether you're designing a crane pad or need to build a temporary road over muck, the cost, time, and carbon savings can be calculated, making comparison with alternatives simple. Specs, reports, and product data can be generated for your design, and training resources, research, and our third-party expert reviews are all provided conveniently in the software if needed. Usable both online and offline, the app is available in browser and on all major mobile platforms. Whatever you're working on, Tensar Plus is your toolbox for success.
Thank you, Tensar, for your sponsorship of Geo-Institute events and specifically of this episode. With all that out of the way, our editor today, who will be conducting the interview, is Mary Nodine. You may know her from GEI Consultants. You may know her as the GeoPoet. You may know her from Director's Cut. You may know her from GeoStrata Extra, however you know her. She's going to do the interviewing duties today. Our guests are Kurt Fraese and Joel Carson, who are going to be talking about their 2 pieces in the current GeoStrata. And with that, take it away, Mary.
Thank you, Brad. So as Brad mentioned, in this edition, we're fortunate to have not 1 but 2 authors of not 1 but 2 articles, 2 published in the April-May 2022 issue of GeoStrata with the theme Educating Geos. Joel Carson and Kurt Fraese authored Geoeducation, the Practitioner Hiring Manager's Perspective, and Geoeducation, the Recent Graduate's Perspective. These articles were written to summarize findings from 2 surveys, one distributed to hiring managers and a second to recent graduates at engineering firms across the country. My name is Mary Nodine. I'm a project manager with GEI Consultants in Woburn, Massachusetts, though I'm currently stationed in Maine. I've been an editor for 6 years, and I've authored the GeoPoet column for GeoStrata since 2008. Now I will introduce our authors and interviewees. Joel Carson is the Geoprofessional Business Association's CEO and Executive Director. He leads, directs, and manages the association's operations to achieve its purpose, vision, and strategic plan, and acts as the primary liaison for the organization with external parties and the public. The GBA helps its members and their clients confront risk and optimize business performance by delivering unique professional resources, programs, and services that make them stronger, smarter, and more successful. GBA accomplishes its purpose through advocacy, education, and collaboration. I mean, he's very well suited to write these articles. Prior to Joel's role with GBA, he was a practicing geoprofessional consultant for more than 25 years. Thank you, Joel, for being here.
Morning.
All right, Kurt Fraese began his career with Woodward Clyde Consultants in 1983, serving in their geophysics division and later in their dams and tunnels group. Kurt joined Geoengineers in 1988, focusing his technical expertise in environmental assessment and remediation, and became the CEO president in March of 2007. He retired from the firm in April 2017. A former president of GBA, he currently provides business advisory services to geoprofessional firms through his firm, Fraese & Associates, focused on strategic planning, mergers and acquisitions, market intelligence, client feedback and engagement, owner leadership transition, executive coaching, conflict resolution, professional development, and peer review. Thanks for being here, Kurt. Kurt and Joel's in-depth articles provide results and insights from the separate surveys they developed and distributed to hiring managers and recent graduates at engineering consulting firms. I know many readers, myself included, found the articles interesting and relevant, particularly in this moment of an extremely competitive job market that is particularly challenging on the employer's end. In this installation of GeoStrata Extra, we'll delve deeper into the articles by asking some probing questions to explore more about the background of the survey and the author's insights into the results. If you have questions for Kurt and Joel, I encourage you to type them into the comments for the videos while you watch, and we'll do our best to address them as time allows. All right, I'll get started with the questions. First, it would be helpful to learn more about the background of the survey. So, Kurt, I'll start with you. How did you develop the survey questions?
Well, first, Mary, let me say thank you to you and GeoStrata for the opportunity to talk about this essential topic of geoeducation. I think it's super important, particularly in this day and age. So thank you for that. To answer your question, in developing these survey questions, we wanted to be able to compare the results to a similar survey and articles that were published in GeoStrata in April 2013. So we used many of the same questions. We also thought about what we could ask that might be a little different and to gain some new perspectives. And we focused on computer science and software engineering, preparedness for professional relationships with colleagues and clients, other aspects of related sciences and technology. So the additional questions went to that. Both surveys included multiple choice answers and open-ended questions. The multiple choice questions had consistent choices focused on the frequency of the experience being explored. So, for example, we asked, in your experience, has the recent graduate hires education prepared them well to understand how business works? And the choices with that multiple choice question and many of the others were never, occasionally, frequently, or always. This gave us a consistent way of comparing answers and measuring so the answers weren't all over the place.
All right, great. And I have some more questions later about the comparing with the 2013 survey, because I think that's fascinating how you did one and then had this sort of basis for comparison in a very different time. So Joel, how did you select and distribute the surveys to the respondents, and how much time did you wait for the responses?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And first, I also want to thank you for hosting us today. Our GBA really appreciates the relationship that we have with ASCE, Geo-Institute, and GeoStrata. It really supports our strategic partnership because we complement each other, and together we raise the value of geoprofessions together. So back to your question about how we distributed the surveys. We know from experience that we couldn't simply just sound out an email with a survey and get great responses. So as Kurt said, we spent a lot of time preparing the right survey questions. But the second step that we took was to reach out to our network of GBA members and let them know the survey was coming and the value of their responses to their businesses and to our industry. So we primed the pump a little bit before we sent out the surveys. And then when we did send out the surveys, our distribution was to two groups, hiring managers and recently graduated employees from their firms. We didn't necessarily send the surveys directly to the hiring managers and recent graduates, though. We sent them to influential people within our member firms and asked them to distribute them for us. And we feel like that really gave us some great success. We gave 2 weeks to respond to the survey, knowing from past experience, if you give more time than 2 weeks, you're just not going to get any more responses. And fortunately, the response was really generous. And our members provided great responses, which allowed us to have a lot of confidence in the data.
How many responses did you end up getting from each of them? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, well, while more data is better, in our initial planning stages, we set a goal for 100 responses to each of the surveys. We also agreed that there would be some minimum number that we'd either have to go back out and ask for more help, or we wouldn't be able to produce the articles. And we were really fortunate, to answer your question. On average, we received over 100 responses to each of the two surveys. And I think that's a testament to the value of this survey, what GeoStrata is doing, and how generous our members are with their time.
Mary, I'd also like to add that the open-ended questions, people really leaned into them. So we got some great written responses. They didn't just focus on the multiple choice and do the easy path. And that was very gratifying.
Yeah, that is great. I've done surveys before, and the challenge is like wading through the open-ended responses. And did you have a strategy for like figuring out how to sort of pull the common trends in those?
Well, this may sound a bit cheesy, but not the game, but the actual wordle function of figuring out what words were used most often is how I start. Mm-hmm. And I have some fun with that, and that was a good way to get an initial snapshot.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you generally get responses from the particular people you wanted to hear from, or did you have any challenges in that regard?
It was an anonymous survey, but yes. So
I didn't mean specifically like the name, but I mean like the types of people. I know you mentioned like graduate students versus undergrad educations and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we got great responses. We were really happy with the responses that we received from the different groups that we asked for responses.
It was very diverse. It was across North America, and that was important to us. So a good distribution and small and large firms as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. All right, so I'd like to explore the preparedness of recent graduates for new jobs, because in your articles it was alluded to that a fair number of hiring managers felt that their new hires were not sufficiently prepared, and that in particular recent graduates did not understand well enough how consulting businesses worked, and they were maybe not prepared as well as the hiring managers would have liked to interact well with clients and even colleagues. So first, just to clarify, Kurt, how did you define a recent graduate?
Oh, thanks for asking that. That's kind of important. That was a hard one because there's not an answer in the book for that. So we wanted to make sure that it was caught a little bit of pre-pandemic folks. And so we went with 4 years. So a recent graduate hire was defined as somebody who'd graduated and been hired within the last 4 years.
Okay. And that means graduate from either an undergraduate program or
yes.
master's?
Yeah. A university degree of some sort.
Okay. So, Kurt, again, the focus of engineering programs at universities is technical skills. I think we all sort of agree on that. And yet it seems like a lot of the hiring managers felt like graduates maybe weren't prepared, and that the lack of preparedness was more in the realm of how business worked. Do you feel that it's reasonable for firms to expect students to come in prepared to understand the business, or should skills like this be part of on-the-job training?
Well, I do feel it's reasonable for universities to better prepare their students for understanding of business, and for geoprofessional firms to become more engaged and lean into universities and interact with universities more than we do. We should really meet each other halfway in a collective effort. Most graduates don't stay in academia, and many pursue positions in the private sector. Some business acumen is necessary for a strong start to a career. And I will note that coaching and teaching business skill is a central component of many training and professional development programs that geoprofessional firms have. I'm just suggesting that both universities and those firms do more to interact and meet each other halfway. I think there's a lot we can share with universities, and a number of us, myself included, have done that for a long time and actually gone into the universities and worked with them.
In what ways have you done that? Like, what are some examples of what you've done with the students?
At 2 universities, I've taught an engineering geology course. And at my alma mater, Cal Poly Humboldt State, in California, I've joined the board, the foundation board for the university.
And Mary,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kurt. I might add that GBA has a membership category for faculty, very low cost, where we allow GBA materials to be used by students. We also provide scholarships for free attendance at our conference to local universities. So I think to Kurt's point, we're attacking this in a lot of different ways. I think we just need to meet universities halfway more frequently.
And Mary, I'd like to clarify, my engineering geology course is applied. I had a client, a very good client, give us an actual project, and we use that as a laboratory throughout the semester. And we work on a consulting project.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is we have professors. I mean, I always felt as a university student years ago that some of the most engaging professors that I had were professors of the practice, I guess, that were coming from consulting firms. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were teaching about consulting. Like, you can be from a consulting firm but still just be teaching someone theory about something. So I think that sort of getting that practical application and how does this work in the real world is important. And what can professors be doing more on their own? Like, what are specific maybe courses or topics that you could think of that might be beneficial to helping people enter the consulting field?
Well, this will be a theme with my answers throughout this session, and that is technical skill is critical, but it is just as critical to relate to other human beings. And so I often will tell people that they need to make sure they have some strong humanities and liberal arts, which shocks people coming in a technical course that's my answer to that. But I'll get into that a little bit more in some of the other answers as we go on.
Okay. And so last note on that particular topic, you noted in the article that recent graduates that they seem extremely confident in their preparedness for their jobs. So is there a gap here between how prepared graduates feel and how prepared their employees perceive them to be? And what do you think is causing that?
Yes, it's good to see that both the recent hires and the hiring managers are not in agreement on everything. And yes, there is a gap. The survey revealed a gap between the perception of hiring managers and recent grads regarding preparedness, particularly in regard to their job responsibilities that they begin with. The hiring manager survey results indicated that a third of recent graduate hires only occasionally meet the job responsibility expectations of their managers. We found this somewhat alarming. It's a good chunk. Of further concern, half the manager respondents also said that The education received only occasionally prepares the recent hires for their work assignments. Whereas most of the recent graduate hires surveyed cited a strong level of preparedness for their job responsibilities and attributed it to their education. So there is a pretty sizable gap this survey revealed between those perceptions. Notably, the expressions of significant graduate confidence were shared in a number of the written answers. One quote that stood out is, "I had all the technical skills required for consulting, plus some." However, I'll point out that in general, the expressions of confidence were juxtaposed to expressions of enthusiasm to learn and to expand horizons. So, there was a balance there.
Yes, and I think confidence is really important, but at the same time, so is humility and curiosity, right? So
yeah,
there has to be a balance there. But I thought that was interesting. All right, so Joel, I'm going to direct this one to you. What are some of the most effective ways that engineering firms have found to bridge the gap? Oh, this is the question that I kind of jumped ahead to this one when talking to Kurt, but I'll let you answer it in your own way. What are some of the most effective ways engineering firms have found to bridge the gap between what universities provide and what recent hires need to succeed in their jobs?
Thank you.
This question more about what the engineering firms can do, not what the universities can do. So
right. Yeah. So yeah, as you pointed out and Kurt pointed out, there is a gap that needs to be bridged, and feedback that we receive show that engineering firms are finding ways to do so. So when done strategically, that gap can start to be filled before a candidate even graduates through internship programs. So 70% of the hiring managers that responded to this survey said that their firms are frequently or always using internship programs in their company. So I think this is a really great strategy. It's exposing interns to consulting before they even graduate. And it also gives the hiring managers the opportunity to vet them candidates for future hiring. Post-graduation, some of the strategies that our survey respondents shared with us, that they're relying on internal customized training programs, mentoring, and coaching. I think it's also worth noting that many firms supplement their internal programs with materials, resources, and courses provided by associations like ASCE and the Geo-Institute and GBA. So, what's the synergy that we have with ASCE is where you're providing great technical resources. We're also helping engineers to be better consultants. In fact, in that issue of GeoStrata magazine, we shared some information about what we provide to our members. And really, it's to help engineers to be better consultants through some of the resources that they can use to augment their internal training, coaching, and mentoring programs.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like a lot of that is sort of tailored to the specific needs of the firm, but mentoring and all of that kind of sort of personalized training is obviously critical, and there's no way to really learn the business without it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, Joel. Kurt, is there anything engineering firms can do that would both improve the job experience from the new hire perspective and improve the skills needed of new hires from the hiring manager's perspective? So I'm kind of saying, like, is there some symbiosis here? Like, really, the new hires maybe need the same things that the firms need to make them better consultants, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, there's much that our firms can do to improve the job experience for new hires and also their performance through skill development. From the recent graduate perspective, geoprofessional firms, this didn't surprise me, but I hadn't thought about it in a long time, and I think it's a really important point. The feedback indicated that the firms should choose their operations managers wisely. And those aren't the words they used, but that's more or less what they were getting at. too often we promote top client and project managers to supervisory operational roles in our firms, and the skill sets don't necessarily translate to great people management. The survey did say, and this is a quote, that having great supervisors is a key to having a great job experience. Quite often people leave because they don't like their supervisor interaction. So firms could do a lot more in that to improve the experience. Also, a recent graduate perspective, they expressed the need for help, and this list won't surprise anybody. They're not all that great with resolving issues of stress and conflict. So some expressed the need for that kind of help. Time management was listed by a number of folks as something they struggle with. And no surprise, student loan debt and an interest in higher wages than they're experiencing. So that's a hot topic right now in an inflationary spiral. From the hiring manager perspective, firms should focus attention on operations training with programs that address several things the hiring managers identified. One is a lack of field and practical experience coming out of college. Second is communication and technical writing. And by the way, that appeared in the 2013 article as something that was people needed more help with and work on. And then, of course, the development of business acumen. Those are some of the thoughts that the survey pointed us towards.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I always find it interesting that I feel like you go to school as an engineer and you're taught engineering, and this stuff is kind of touched on, like technical writing, and then you sort of end up in an engineering firm. You have like a pool of people, and it's like you're lucky if you. It feels like you're lucky if you get some good people managers in there. But it's not something that is like specifically sought out when the people, and it's almost like if you could identify those people early on and groom them to be. I feel like that would probably be beneficial. But it's tricky when you're working with a bunch of engineers. They're out there.
Yeah, well, and those same people are often very good with clients. So
yeah, true. But I think anything schools can do and early career mentoring can do to improve that is probably more, at least if not more important than technical skills for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so Joel, this one's for you. Most new hire respondents had only a bachelor degree. You mentioned that in the article. But was there a notable difference in job preparedness that you could discern among the bachelor's, master's, and PhD level candidates?
Yeah, it was really interesting to both Kurt and I that 77% of our respondents reported bachelor's degrees as their highest level of degree earned. Traditionally, this was unexpected, and because traditionally advanced degrees make up a higher percentage of recent hires by engineering consulting community. So that was a surprise to us. That being said, the responses from master's and doctorate graduates suggested that having advanced degrees made the biggest difference in being ready to fulfill their job responsibilities. And this is where those commentaries that Kurt shared with us as being so important to these survey results comes into play. In fact, one of the survey participants said that their undergraduate degree prepared them a little, but their master's degree contributed to a large extent to their preparedness to enter the consulting world. So we did see some difference in the level of preparedness depending on the level of graduate.
All right, and that makes sense. I feel like a master's degree has a big effect in this field. All right, so this one's also for you, Joel. The hiring manager article mentioned some of the impressive aspects of recent graduates. So I'm being positive now. Their enthusiasm, their grasp of engineering knowledge, and their computer skills. The computer skills, well, I could comment on this, but I think there's a lot of potential there that we're not taking advantage of. Are there ways that firms could better leverage these and other skills that recent grads have? Because in this job market in particular, I think it's important to work optimally with what we have.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mary. And I'm really glad you asked me this question because those observations about recent graduates were the highlight for me. Let's say it again. Hiring managers mentioned the most impressive aspects of recent graduates being their enthusiasm, grasp of engineering knowledge, and computer skills. That is awesome. And so I think it's pretty simple. Hiring managers need to find ways to tap into that enthusiasm and knowledge by providing opportunities that apply to real life projects. So let those recent graduates work on projects that they can be proud of, with teams that appreciate their contributions, give them purpose, let them stretch, let them occasionally fail. Provide a culture where growth is celebrated and rewarded. And I think that's a big secret to retaining talent.
I think that's a great answer, and I like the idea of letting them occasionally fail, because I think if you are pushing people and putting them into a place where they are challenged, and that is a real risk, they're going to be a lot more engaged and excited. I think making sure to keep them, I mean, it can be hard. Things like long-term field jobs can really wear people down, and making an effort to make sure that people are, like, you know, obviously there's some level of grind in our work, and that's just part of the deal, but to the degree possible to, like, keep people engaged and moving on to different things, I think that's important too. But yeah, that's a great answer. I always think of, like, the computer skills. I feel like sometimes the geotechnical engineering can be a little bit behind the times in computer stuff. I don't know. I think of data management, for example, and, like, I feel like we could be really leveraging some of the skills that new people are coming in and don't even know what those, like, say, programming skills could be used for.
Yeah, we did. We just had a great presentation at our spring conference by Dr. Demetrius Zikos from UC Berkeley, where he really challenged us to go out and find those people that have computer skills and technical backgrounds that may not look or feel like the rest of us that are doing engineering and geology work. And that might be part of the secret to more efficiency and to solving this staffing issues, is looking for people that maybe not traditional engineers and geologists.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, like, figure out ways to sort of make the system more efficient. Is that?
Yeah. Do more with less and actually produce a better product with less.
No, I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and there's the instinct to get everybody the field experience, and that is, like, the holy grail, and that is really important. But I think I agree, like, if you can identify some of those people with special skills who could potentially be really creative and do things in different ways, that could make a huge difference. All right, this one's for Kurt. Some of the challenges with recent hires that were mentioned included unwillingness to ask questions for fear of appearing inadequate, unwillingness to work long hours in some cases, and impatience with the speed of promotion and raise increases. I don't think the long hours and field deployments in our line of work are going away, but at the same time, we need to retain staff. So this is a little bit related to the previous question about engagement that we were just discussing, but how can employers work through some of these challenges to both motivate and increase the satisfaction of their young staff with their engineering career experience?
Well, Mary, that's a loaded question. We could almost talk the entire time about this one, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I would say that from the very start, emphasize, teach, mentor, and coach that your geoprofessional firm is, at least in part, if not in whole, in the business of consulting, providing advice, exercising professional judgment, and offering options. And I think a part and parcel of this is to emphasize that it's noble work. New hires, new graduates really are interested in knowing they're doing things to help improve the world. And GBA, at least, is for its entire existence seen what we do as noble work. Much more noble than we actually seek in the value or in the remunerations that we seek. We have a big improvement area there. That's another talk for another day. But the noble work of providing essential advice to client enterprises and communities to find opportunity and challenge in their connections to the earth. That's where we play. And this means that we must acknowledge that success is as much dependent on our human relations skills as it is our academic expertise and technical skill. Also, companies can do more to encourage open, transparent cultures of communication and learning that encourage the exploration and the asking of questions and unknowns without a fear of judgment. I think one of the takeaways here is, sadly, many of the new hires did express that they are afraid of questions. Have to ask what kind of cultures make it fearful for people to ask questions. So it may be time to reconsider just how your culture's set up for question asking and for kind of pursuit of continual learning. As for the long hours, you're right, that's not going away. From my perspective, instead of employers and employees trying to accommodate and achieve a work-life balance, which in a way is a measured equilibrium, which really can never be achieved in both work and life at the same time, I think the aspiration should shift to trying to accommodate and achieve a graceful integration of both work and life. This means firms offering their employees more flexibility in the hours and places worked, and employees recognizing that a productive and a fulfilling professional career is not a 40-hour-a-week job. It requires both passion, it requires skill, and the passion will get you through the long hours. It requires a commitment to continuous learning and stretching of one's talents and being an opportunist while maintaining a nimble spirit and integrating all of this with one's life. And I love the 40-hour work thing, because this is the last place you want to go if that's where if that's what you think it's going to be. But passion will fuel you for a lot of long hours and that noble pursuit.
Right. You can't sell it to people by telling them how much overtime they're going to have. However, I think the idea that you're really contributing to something, for I think firms that can convey that value, hopefully will have people jumping on board, and also like making sure that people feel like they're learning throughout those long hours to the extent possible, and not just in this long grind of work, I think can be helpful. The fear of asking questions point that's a very good point, that it's the people coming into the firm and maybe a larger cultural situation that we're in, and it's like, how can we, it's sort of the education system, and that needs to be like encouraging asking questions as a way of learning and not being afraid to be wrong. But I think that's a good point. Yeah. Not necessarily something engineering firms can fix, but at the same time, I think I know that we do everything we really make a point of trying to have people feel comfortable not always being right and asking questions and calling from the field as much as they feel like they need to. So, all right. So we do have a question from the audience, so I'll insert that here. I think we sort of discussed it already, but if there's anything else you want to touch on. Bill Levy asks, great topic. Did the article or the survey discuss the importance of paid internships? What are your perspectives on this in best preparing students?
Go ahead, Kurt.
Oh, Kurt.
It did. Internships came up, and I would have to say internships might be the #1 thing cited in terms of an effective bridge between the student and their future employer. And that really stood out in the answers we got from both the hiring managers and the recent graduate hires. So Bill, that's not lost on anybody. We think there's actually room for even more leveraging of internships. And those companies that aren't using them that much, it's an excellent choice to consider engaging that to help with the hiring process and landing great folks who, by virtue of the internship, will have some practical experience once they land full-time.
Yeah, it definitely benefits both the people doing the internships and the employers who can kind of test drive people and get an opportunity to teach people. All right, so Joel, one of the biggest challenges firms are facing today is not just hiring, but staff retention with significant turnover across the industry. What can we learn from the results of your surveys that might apply not only to recruiting good engineers, but also keeping staff engaged over the long term?
Yeah, this was a really good question, Mary, because hiring and retention are the top highest concerns of our member firms right now in a survey that we just conducted internally. They are number one and number two. So I think it's really important that consulting firms have a culture that is warm and welcoming, that are inclusive, where everybody feels like their voice matters and that they have the support to grow personally and professionally. And so employers just have to provide those opportunities for growth and a system to support the support development. So establishing these through internal programs, we've talked about mentorship programs, continuing education, just setting these up and then also do what you say you will do, meet your commitments to your employees, and that will help in retention. I think salary is also a concern that we have to address as employers to make sure that we're staying current with salary demands of new graduates. They're higher than we've ever seen before, and it's something that we have to really address.
Right. It's not something that we can just keep saying, oh, well, that person's being unreasonable and that person's being unreasonable.
Yeah. And it also can be very creative. I liked one of Kurt's responses where he talked about the students' concern about student loans. So it doesn't have to be just in compensation, but it also could be in other creative ways to make them feel that they are getting compensated fairly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, take the pain point of their financial worries and maybe address that specifically. And it might be more effective than just giving them an extra $5,000.
Yeah.
And new hires are looking for creative differentiators when selecting their firms right now. One other thing I wanted to point out, kind of riffing off of what Joel had to say on this answer, is that the companies with internal programs, hiring managers all pretty much said they have internal and other programs for professional development and training and starting with new hires, and that there's a lot of career growth. The recent hires recognize some of that, but not to the degree the hiring managers did. And so I kind of took from that because the firms I work with, I know they have these programs. I just don't think we communicate it as well as we should to entry-level folks in terms of what's out there and what's available within firms. So I think the survey indicated that perhaps there's some additional communication and making people aware of the career path help that exists.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. So, Kurt, back to you. You commented that rather than a war for talent, recruiting and retention should be a, quote, contact sport. Can you talk more about what you meant by that?
Yeah, I simply mean that too often we hide behind our advertisements for positions, and we then follow that by simply reading and assessing the resumes we receive. We wouldn't pursue our new projects and with clients by simply advertising and responding to RFPs. Great client relationships are an external exercise in contact with those clients and follow through with intensive listening and much contact. So what I'm suggesting is that in this day and age of extreme competition for new and existing talent, we must be proactive and pursue new employees and keep existing employees through relationship building. That theme comes up again, just like you do with potential clients. If you look at in this day and age that your employees are in a way like clients in terms of what it takes to find them and keep them, I think that's a better model. The more external contacts your firm makes with universities and students, the more success you'll have in recruiting. The more supervisors proactively engage in outreach and continual feedback and mentoring to their direct reports, the more success you'll have in keeping your folks.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it used to be that people more felt lucky to have a job, and now one perspective could be that, oh, this is putting so much more work on managers. Like, not only are we trying to please our clients, but we're trying to be proactive in our hiring, proactive in our retention. But at the same time, I think it creates a more engaging and happy work environment if people are all kind of connected and really focused on engaging with each other. So ideally, it's a win-win, but I think that's a really important point. All right. Joel, the hiring manager article mentions that there was a similar survey done in 2013, and you mentioned this also in this industry. 2013 was, as I've said a couple times, a very different era in terms of job market and economy. So I'm curious if there were any overarching differences in the responses between the 2013 survey and this 2021 survey.
Yeah, and actually, just back to the previous question, the answers kind of revolve around this. So back in 2013, if we remember, we were in the wake of the Great Recession. This was characterized by generally low revenue, low backlog, and there was really fierce competition for projects, more than there was a competition for employees. And it could be considered at that time to be an employer's market, and new graduates found it to be very highly competitive market to land those very few job openings that were available. So now let's fast forward to today, where our members are telling us that we're in an era of record revenue, where the backlog is as high as it's ever been. There's some uncertainty in the economy and in the world affairs, but our members are feeling really bullish on the future. And so we're also entering this post-COVID era that many of us have heard it called the Great Resignation. All that being said, the highest concern for our members today is hiring and retaining great staff to do all the work that we have. And so I'd suggest now that we're in what I would call an employee market, with graduates having multiple job offers, higher level of compensation for entry than ever before. And so really, employers need to be on their game to attract graduates to their firms, using many of the strategies that we've talked about earlier in this conversation. And I think hiring managers would be very interested in the results of these surveys in this recent issue of GeoStrata, so that they can start using some of the information that we've shared here to be a more attractive workplace to hire and retain great employees.
Yeah, it's almost like relative to 2013, it's almost more important to be forming good relationships with the people you're hiring and are working with than it is to be focusing all your energy on winning work. Yeah. Which is like very counterintuitive to consultants, but it sounds scary to like focus more internally than externally, but it almost seems like this time that might be where your efforts are best spent.
I think so.
Yeah. All right, and the last question I have, which is a big one, Kurt, for you, in the conclusion of your recent hire article, you wrote, "For a profitable enterprise, it's more important than ever that employees be able to relate to and build productive relationships with colleagues, clients, and the communities we serve. The surveys suggest that such skill is not easily taught in a classroom or in our firms. It comes from a deeper place, with an openness to building emotional intelligence that's both self-reflective and values the different experience and skill of others." I find this to be very true and also very intangible, but I'm still going to ask, what advice would you give both new hires and their mentors for helping to work toward this holy grail?
Well put, Mary, and guilty as charged on the intangible elements of this. So I'll try to approach the holy grail. I'll start with, I've often said, and this probably isn't entirely and fully true, but I think in general it was true, that I never hired based on who was the better geologist or engineer. I kind of assumed, based on their college education and having completed that everybody was about on par there. And if they weren't, I was going to be able to find that out very quickly on a technical basis. I tended to make hiring decisions based on who I thought, put very simply, was a better human being, or who had the ability to relate to other human beings. I think it's important for us to understand and embrace the fact that our organizations and your firms function more like biological entities rather than structural mechanical things. This understanding, I think, really comes hard to us as scientists and engineers. I think the great quote that not everything that is measured is important and not everything that is important can be measured applies here. Elevate adaptability in human relationship building and continual learning as critical success factors for both your career as you're entering it and for the firm as you run it. Don't overlook these things as you occupy your comfort zones of applying engineering and scientific technical skills to manage risk. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. Be open to and learn from different backgrounds, experiences, ideas. And super important, getting back to the human relations piece. At the end of every human interaction you have in your career, ask yourself, did I bring energy to the exchange or take it? And be a net energy giver.
I love it. That is a very good, wise words for sort of every aspect of our lives, for sure. Yeah, thank you. I think that people have a lot to learn in this regard, and hopefully they can take something away from this, and good food for thought. I think Brad might be typing another question. I'm not sure, but Brad, that's the last of the questions that I had, unless Joel or Kurt have other comments to make, or if there's other questions from the floor. All right. Well, Joel and Kurt, I really appreciate your time, and I encourage anyone who hasn't read the articles to read them for sure. But I think that there was a lot here that we delved deeper into that I think was really valuable. So hopefully people will enjoy this interview and watch it and be able to have some good ideas for their own firms and experiences.
Mary, before we wrap, I'd just like to say thank you to a few people. First of all, my co-author and dear friend Kurt Fraese from Fraese and Associates. He's a coach and a mentor, and working with him on this project was really awesome. I had a great time. I also want to thank Jim Withiam. Thank you, Kurt. Jim Withiam, who is a long-term ambassador at GBA and really involved with GeoStrata, who brought us into this project. It was really nice of him to think of us. Mary, I think you did an awesome job on an interview today. You really got into the meat of the survey, so thank you very much. And Brad, thank you and everybody at Geo-Institute. We cherish our partnership with you all, and together we can move mountains, together we can elevate the profession together. And then I just want to thank all the members of GBA that contributed to these surveys. It just is real typical of GBA member firms. They're very generous with their time, and when we are going to solve problems, we collaborate and solve them together. So thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. I'm hoping that you guys do another one in like 2031, something like that. Who knows where we'll be then?
Not likely, but we'll pass on our data.
You'll pass on your data. And it'll be much more efficient to work with at that time, and we'll all be using digs. It's going to be amazing.
That was good.
Kurt, do you have any final words?
I just want to thank all of the above as Joel went through that list, and a special additional shout out to Jim Whittiam, who has inspired me to take my interest in language and communication and continue to apply it through these means. And I've collaborated with him on a number of different things through the years, and I thank you to Jim.
It was great timing to hear a shout out for Diggs there, Mary. So thank you. And if you don't know about Diggs, you can find out more at geo-institute.org. So thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Joel. And thanks, Mary. This was a really good discussion today. And thank you guys for a couple of great articles for the April-May GeoStrata. I will tell everybody one more time to head over to geo-institute.org to find out more about us. You can click on the link at the bottom of the page, and that will take you to the site where you can read the current issue or about 5 years worth of back issues of GeoStrata. So if you have some time over a weekend, you can do that. Alternatively, you can check out some of the other stuff we have on the YouTube channel. It's not just about GeoStrata Extra. We've got Director's Cut every week. We have Geo Legends that airs 6 times a year with some of the most preeminent names in our profession. We have Field Trips, which is a brand new show featuring Mary was in an episode of Field Trips as well, telling a hilarious story from the field. And there are about a gazillion other things that you can spend your time watching on the Geo-Institute YouTube channel. So, of course, you should like this video, you should subscribe, you should get notifications. And again, we will let you know every single time we post something to the channel if you do that. So one final thanks to our presenters today. You guys did a great job. Our next live stream will be in 2 days at 10 a.m. on Thursday, and it's one of our offshore geotechnics pre-conference workshops. This one is on the fundamentals of cyclic loading. You can find out more about that at isfog2020.org or at our Eventbrite page. So everybody have a great day, and we will see you next time.